Hello, friends. Now that we've learned about effects of setting on characters, now we're going to move on to another part of the story, which is the plot. The plot consists of the different conflict, the solution, which is also the resolution, the different events that happen in the story. So, what we are going to do is we are going to close read this story. Now, the first time that we read it, if we remember, when we close read, you read it on your own. You highlight any words that you don't know, and then you use your resources to determine what the words mean so we understand what the author is trying to tell us or say prior to looking into the actual looking at our setting and our plot. So I'm going to have you get your highlighter, and we're going to have our pens as well, so if you don't have a highlighter, and I would like you to pause this and read and do just that. When we come back, we'll read it a second time, and we'll be looking for the setting and how it affects the plot. All right, so we are going to be reading it the second time, and we are going to be looking at the setting, where does the story take place, and we're going to be looking at the plot. So how does the setting affect the events in the story? If it happened somewhere else, do you really think that the story would have unfolded the way that it did? For example, if there's something that happens at school, it might not be exactly how it would happen if the event was at home. It might have a different ending. So we're going to read. Airplanes were really only a few years older than Martha was. However, ever since she had seen one as a very young girl, she wanted to fly. It was the early 20th century, so women didn't have many of the opportunities that men did. When flight school opened in her town in rural Alabama, Martha was not surprised to learn that it was for men only. However, that didn't stop her. Ooh, that's showing us some perseverance, doesn't it? That's what we were talking about last week, not never giving up, that big word, perseverance. So the setting, remember, is also a time. It could be a time in history. So we're going to be looking at, this is the early 20th century, which is the early 1900s. And if you know anything about that time period, or if you don't, women did not have as many opportunities as men, as it says here. They didn't really have the right to vote yet, and they were not equal in the workplace. They stayed home. So they did not have the opportunity to be pilots during that time like they do now. Martha's brother Stan had no interest in airplanes, but she convinced him to sign up for the school. Martha devoured Stan's textbooks, and when he returned from class, she had him repeat everything he learned. She'd build a model of a cockpit out of a scrap wood from the family farm. Finally, it was time to practice. At that, Martha's plans got especially complicated. She had Stan sign up for the last training runs of the day so that there would be less people around. Martha dressed in a bulky jumpsuit, headgear, and a scarf so that it was impossible to tell that she wasn't Stan. With endless hours of study and practice, Martha slowly became an amazing pilot. So she didn't let anything stop her there. Then came the day for Stan's final exam. A series of complicated maneuvers. Martha, in her disguise, climbed into the training plane. She completed the exam flawlessly. She even added some flourish at the end with a sideways roll. When she landed, the students and instructors greeted the plane with applause. Martha climbed down from the cockpit and took off her disguise. The crowd went silent, except for Stan, who was standing in the back and kept clapping. After the shock wore off, everyone congratulated Martha. In fact, she was offered a position as an instructor at the school. From that day onward, it was open to women too. Now let's think about the setting, the time period. Okay? The time period did not allow, women into the fly school. So as a result, she had to dress up as Stan in order to get into the fly school, in order to get an equal opportunity to be a pilot. So if that was not during the 20th century, do you think she would have to do the same thing? If it was during a different time period, do you think she would have to dress up and go through all of these different events if it was in a different time period? If it was in an earlier time period, they wouldn't even have had an opportunity to have planes. So let's think about this question. What was the setting? So we already have half of the setting. Remember, the setting is where and when a story takes place. So we already have when. Think about where it is, okay? How does it affect the plot? How does it affect the events that happened? And I kind of just discussed that while we were reading it. So now you're going to read it a third time. Answer this question, okay? Then you're going to go to Schoology and type in your answer to this question in the discussion. And then later on, with the other question that we answered about setting, we'll be discussing it in small group next week.